Five Nights at Freddy's, also known as FNAF, is a huge franchise with 12 games, 32 books, and more to come. I mean, how could it not be a huge franchise? Heck, we got 3 different trailers for 3 separate projects, and the community is going nuts. With a huge franchise, though, comes a huge community with OCs, separate headcanons, and of course, fan games. With over thousands of FNAF fan games, some good and some not so good, I'm gonna try my hardest to discern which of these FNAF fan games is the best out of them all. Okay. Before we get into this, I'm going to be detailing how I'm going to be ranking these FNAF games. Firstly, just overall gameplay. When I say gameplay, I don't mean how I want the game to play. I'm talking about difficulty to enjoyment ratio well balanced. Is the game to the point where I don't fear the next death because it's happened so many times or because I'm too focused? Just overall enjoyment and the gameplay. The next part of the games I want to take a look at is the difficulty curve. Yes, it seems like a basic, but if night 1 is super easy and night 2 feels like night 5, there's an issue with that difficulty curve. I should be getting better with the game as it's pushing me, not the game pushing me deeper and deeper into a hole that I can't learn from. Thirdly, fear and suspense. These are arguably the most important part of a FNAF fan game. I should be afraid as I play. It's a horror game after all, not something made with MS Paint. I should be genuinely made afraid to check the cameras, to peek around a corner. The game should create a sense of dread while playing it, and not to the point of turning it off out of fear, but just to the edge of that. Lastly, originality. We want this game to feel like its own separate standalone game, not just another clone of Five Nights at Freddy's or just some run-of-the-mill MS Paint creation. With all this being said, keep into consideration that these are my personal opinions on how I view these FNAF fan games. You're inclined to make your own conclusions on each game and how you perceive them. So, without further ado, let's start the ratings. First on the list is the game called Juniors. I know it's got a lot of a bad rap with the whole pair scenario, but that doesn't mean the whole team who made it is responsible. They put a lot of effort into this game, and oh man, does it show. First, gameplay. It's beautifully put together with all originally reimagined versions of the FNAF characters. They look creepy yet more lifelike, something that wouldn't feel out of place with the Rockafire Explosion Band. An easy 9 out of 10. Secondly, the difficulty curve. It isn't difficult, but understanding it on your own is kind of a challenge. There isn't a nightly phone call or recording to help you learn the mechanics of the game. You're just kind of shoved in without a clue of what to do or what you're looking for. So it gets a 5 out of 10 on difficulty. Fear and suspense. The game had me worrying and buckling under pressure my first couple times around, and the character designs were genuinely scary. But once I got the hang of it, I saw myself throwing runs due to picking the wrong animatronic, trying to figure out which one had the ghost inside of them. This gets it a 6 out of 10 on fear and suspense. Lastly, originality. Oh my goodness, is this game amazing. The gameplay loop is completely original. Making a ghost move from animatronic to animatronic throughout the night was a great idea. Character designs were beautifully made and minigames were something else, not to mention the moments with Paul Bear and his 64-esque style world. Amazing 9 out of 10 on originality. Overall, Juniors ranked pretty well, but let's move on to the next FNAF game. Yeah, you remember what I was saying about the difficulty curve? It was because of this game. Now, I'm sure this game is really good. It has a beautiful lore. I mean, it has amazing character design, and the intro cutscene was really intriguing, but if you cannot get past the first night, it is not an enjoyable game, thus not a good game. Let's just go on to the next one. Five Nights at Candy's Remastered. This FNAF fan game is a beautiful yet simplistic game. It has small drops of lore simply like the other FNAF games. Not only that, but it connects itself to the original lore of the original franchise by stating that the FNAF 2 location shutting down is causing the surplus of customers into Candy's Pizzeria. This game is very vague and simplistic though, just enough lore in it to keep me enticed to continue playing the game. The gameplay was simplistic, basically copying the original FNAF gameplay formula with a little bit of changes to make it stand out enough against the original gameplay style. I will say though, the new designs for the animatronics compared to the original Five Nights at Candy's game are much better. All this being said, I think I'll give it a 7 out of 10 for gameplay. Now for the difficulty curve. Whilst I was playing the game, I found it pretty easy to grasp onto the concept of it. Most of the characters had roughly the same mechanic. Candy and Cindy just showed up randomly on either the left or right door. For the first couple nights, you don't even have a reason to check the cameras. Nights 1 and 2, you just have to look on either side of the office to see if there's white-eyed dots from either Candy, Cindy, or the Penguin. Once Blank gets introduced though, it does give a slight reason to check the cameras. Really, I only saw myself checking the camera to see if he had left his room and then shutting the ticket booth window. Once Old Candy and Rat were introduced though, it just meant I had to look at either the side camera doors, either on my left or right. Definitely easy to grasp onto the game, and it never really incited a true fear challenge. The difficulty curve just seemed to go up very slowly. So I think I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 10 on the difficulty curve. Now the third thing we're ranking is the one I have the most problem with for this game. Fear and suspense just wasn't something I felt during this game. Don't get me wrong though, I had my moments of where I needed to optimize my playstyle just to get past the night, but I never really had a great fear response to the game. No particular moment had me quaking in my hoodie or something like that. Just generic FNAF fear. I never feared when Blank went out of his room. It was just I either misclicked on cam 5 and he smashed the window and got me, and I think that was the only character I ever got jump scared by. Overall, I think I'm gonna give Fear and Suspense a 4 out of 10 just for the fact that it didn't really incite the fear and suspense I was hoping for. Originality, on the other hand, wasn't something that I had to worry about like the other FNAF Fangames. It was enough like FNAF, and it had its FNAF style of gameplay, but it still felt separate. It definitely felt like a FNAF Fangame, but with enough original ideas to make it stand out from the original FNAF games. With the white-eyed dots to see if the animatronics were at the doors instead of using the flashlight, I thought that was a great idea. The idea that the doors consume more power the longer that they're closed, as well as the ticket booth idea. Having a third door that I can close, great idea. The idea that the office isn't something out of place was great. It shows that it has a genuine purpose during the night shift and the day shift. The end night cutscenes were definitely a nice touch, adding enough questions and lore to the game without saying everything. The random puppet character, who I have no idea about because I've only played the first game, it was enough to make me think, why is this character here and what lore does it connect to Candy, Blank, and Rat? Overall, I'm gonna give originality a 7 out of 10. Let's go to the next game.
Hey, Henry.
William, it's good to hear your voice again. How have you been?
It's been a bit stressful, to be honest, but just busy with the new animatronic project. It's going really well, and I'm excited to finally open up my own restaurant.
I see. Well, we've had a pretty good run with Freddy Fazbear's Pizza so far. It's been doing really well.
Yeah, I've heard. I'm actually a bit jealous, to be honest. I really want my place to be as successful, if not more successful, than Freddy's.
I'm sure it will be, William. You've put a lot of work into this.
Thanks. I really hope so.
Okay, so you guys all heard that opening too, right? Because that was insanely ominous and insanely intriguing. I mean, this game is insane. And when I say insane, I mean it in all the good ways. From the chaos in this game of not knowing what's going to be happening, and also the voicemails explaining it the next night, to the berating of animatronics constantly, which works well in this fan game's favor, unlike other FNAF fan games. So let's talk about the gameplay. The gameplay is generally really good, and the character designs are beautiful. The loading screens add up a little new lit up character on the stage, which is a great touch for every night. The character designs are genuinely creepy. I felt so uneasy while playing and looking at them. Making Fredbear throughout the nights do different things on different cameras was also creepy and a nice little touch. And I will say that the explanation about the flashlight in the hallway was extremely dim. I mean, there was no explanation about it at all. I only discovered it randomly by accidentally clicking into the darkness of the doors. The little Easter eggs, especially in the prize corner behind your office, are so great, and the simplistic gameplay similar to the original FNAF games is what's going to get this fan game an 8 out of 10 on gameplay. The difficulty curve is something for the most part I thought was pretty good for the first 2 nights. Then though, once night 3 rolled around, I was bombarded with a crazy amount of animatronics, unknown information. 2 new animatronics were added on night 3, and with zero explanation on who they were, and how to deal with them. The Fredbear 2.0 and the Spring Bonnie 2.0 added a great aspect to the game though. Fredbear 2.0 slowly creeps up on the left side of the door with disoriented audio to tell that he's there. The Spring Bonnie 2.0 slowly moves up from the right hall, covering its eyes in what the voicemail explains as a game of hide and seek. The Night 4 does write off the not telling us about the 2.0 animatronics by saying the caller forgot to let us know. The difficulty curve is going to be placed at a 7 out of 10, mainly due to the not informing about the 2.0 animatronics on Night 3. Fear and suspense was something that this game thrived in. I don't know how many times I had to take a step back and take a breather just because of how fast and hard my heart rate was beating. I was genuinely afraid to get jump scared. The jump scares and the jump scare screens were beautiful. Now the post jump scare screen was a little gory for YouTube, so I don't think I'll show it to you guys, but you can just go look it up in your own time. The puppet in the back of the office gave me a good sense of anxiety for a horror game. Not something that's overbearing, but a looming sense of dread over my head. The camera positions definitely freaked me out. Like the first time I saw Fredbear take his face off and was close to the camera, it genuinely spooked me. If I were in a night shift position, I'd be freaking about the animatronics moving around already. But if I looked at the camera and saw one of them waving at me into the camera, I'd be out of there in a heartbeat. This game outdid itself in the fear and suspense factors, so I'm gonna have to give it a 10 out of 10. This game made it very clear as soon as I opened it up that it would be taking inspiration from the original FNAF lore from the FNAF games, but would be retelling it and recreating it in its own image. The office was definitely a faithful recreation of the original FNAF office. Now the idea of a FNAF fan game taking place in Fredbear's Family Diner is kind of overused, but with the additions that the game make and with all its little details in recreating the lore of the games, it adds a little bit more definition and beefiness to the game. Overall, a 6 out of 10 on originality. So far, this game is ranked pretty high in comparison to the other games, so let's see what the next FNAF game has to stack up against this one. Pop Goes. This is arguably one of my favorite FNAF games that I've never played. I've watched so much on the lore on this game, and gameplays over gameplays over gameplays, and the concept of this game was just amazing. I mean, with Blake going to the server room to show off the power, Pop Goes going to the 3D printers to go print the Black Rabbit, and even the whole concept of being an animatronic yourself. This makes the panic meter make sense due to your curiosity programming. The designs are pretty goofy, though that might just be due to my new knowledge on what the Pop Goes evergreen models look like. Either way though, gameplay gets a 7 out of 10 due to all of its neatly put together mechanics. The difficulty curve was probably the best out of all of these games. Overlooking all of them so far, it's either been too difficult or too easy. With this game, it was a smooth curve with a new mechanic being added nightly and building off of the previous mechanics nicely. So it's gonna be an easy 9 out of 10 for that. The fear factor wasn't something I felt at all in this game. I mean, I never got a real sense of fear for the animatronics because they're introduced to be right behind you, and plus they can only go out of their way to make your panic meter go up so you malfunction, crash, and die. The fear factor is going to have to be a 4 out of 10 due to that fact for me. Just no sense of real dread. Lastly, originality. Now this game puts effort into making it very clear that it is a continuation and not a recreation. This game follows the lore of FNAF 1 through 3, and it's also in the same universe as Five Nights at Candy's. I know, 2 separate FNAF fan games connected in one universe that also connects to the FNAF original lore? That's absolutely crazy and unheard of. All the different mechanics for the nights definitely make everything feel different and put this game together nicely. All this in the game is going to make me give it a 9 out of 10 on originality. With 2 games left in our video, let's take a look into the penultimate one. Pork Chop's Adventure. I'm at a loss for words for this game. It's an absolute terrifying masterpiece. It's not your typical FNAF fan game where you sit in an office. It's a point-and-click puzzle horror game. The gameplay varies from trying to avoid or keep the animatronic pork chop away from you, playing a 16-bit pork chop adventure minigame in the break room, and also solving puzzles to discover mysteries strewn about the entire studio. With the game not being restricted to an office and giving you the ability to roam around the studio, I immediately felt way more immersed into this game unlike any other, and I truly felt like the main character, with its beautiful art style, which is gonna land it at a 10 out of 10 for gameplay. The difficulty curve is kind of a weird topic for this game, as it wasn't sectioned off into different nights or hours. It was just 1 hour while you waited, Rather than that, I'm going to talk about how the threat increased as the hour went on. The threat of Porkchop wasn't much of an issue. I mean, we heard knocks at the door and looked out, but we're completely fine. It wasn't until the blackout occurred that Porkchop started wandering and stalking the player. The random misfirings of the lights definitely was a huge scare and forced me into a closet, as I could hear noises behind me. The strangeness of the difficulty curve is probably going to lower this, but the main threat always got worse, so it's an 8 out of 10. This part of the game was an absolute perfect piece of it. The fear and suspense. It was executed so beautifully. There were parts of this game where my heart was racing, and I don't mean that like the Return to Bloody Nights. The reason it felt different was because I was way more immersed into this game than I was with Return to Bloody Night. There were times that I thought if my lights were off in my room, I was definitely gonna have to quit the game. After the first time I saw Porkchop, I began physically sweating because of the fear and terror I felt. This part of the game easily deserves a 10 out of 10 on the fear and suspense factor. Lastly, originality for Porkchops. This wasn't the normal FNAF Fangame, but was a point and click. This, along with the puzzles and the minigame you play throughout the hour, was amazing. The best part of this were the separate endings. I personally only got the battery ending because there was no way I was doing more than I had to. But the idea that this is just meant to be a short game that entices the idea of the next game, Porkchop's Horror Show, is crazy. And it's still put together beautifully. This was such a beautiful game with everything being so different in a good way from other FNAF games. This is going to give it another 10 out of 10. Before we talk about the final FNAF game, let's go over some honorable mentions. The last on the list, and probably seen as the best FNAF fan game by many, the Joy of Creation story mode. This game was made with free roam in mind. In several of the nights, we are allowed to get up and roam around the room. It's usually the main aspect of that night, or as this game calls them, memories. While this does allow for the game to be a lot more enjoyable in some parts, it also leaves a lot more wiggle room for glitches to find their way into the game. And I seem to notice that more in this FNAF fan game than any of the other games we've played. This is a genuinely beautiful game with great character designs, but the glitches are gonna remove a couple points, so it's gonna make it a 9 out of 10. The difficulty curve is also a strange topic to talk about, much like it was for Porkchop. Every night, so to say, was different. Sure, the animatronics were more aggressive and separate memories as the night went on. That was about the only thing that stayed consistent throughout all the memories. Other than that though, it was a new formula to learn for every memory. This, with how difficult the game is as a whole, made it hard to learn as you kept going through the night. I had moments where I was close to beating the night, but lost due to 2 animatronics showing up at the same time and not being able to deal with them both. This is going to give it an 8 out of 10 for the difficulty curve. Fear and suspense was something that I found in this game to be genuine for me. For the same case as Porkchops, I was given the option to free roam, and that made me feel so much more immersed in the game. I felt like I was the character that I was playing as. The Endo basement section was definitely the most suspenseful part of the game. Being stuck in a large basement, going slow and told to just roam and follow the objectives as they come, that was terrifying. Once the Weeping Angel Endos came in though, it definitely peaked at the fear and suspense. I jumped back in my seat so many times when getting jump scared by these guys. This is definitely going to give it a 10 out of 10 on the fear and suspense. Originality for this game wasn't something I had to worry about in the slightest. When you start the game, you're a freaking baby in a crib fighting off 4 animatronics in your bedroom. If anything, I'd say that's probably the most original. Heck, for a couple of the nights, you play as the creator of Five Nights at Freddy's, Scott Cawthon. With every memory being completely different game style from the last, originality is going to have to be a 10 out of 10. We've finished the list of all the games that I've played, and we've seen how I've ranked them. So the top 3 games are The Joy of Creation, Return to Bloody Nights, and Porkchop's Adventure. Let's get a drumroll to see which one of these games really deserves the title of Best FNAF Fan Game Ever. The winner by a single point is Porkchop's Adventure. I mean, this game definitely deserves the title. I felt nothing like I had with any of these other FNAF fan games. I felt immersed, I felt fear. The gameplay style was unique and original. It was just an amazing game all around. All of these FNAF fan games were amazing to play, and I genuinely enjoyed my time playing them. It was close in the end of ranking, but I feel that these rankings are pretty fairly distributed. Before you guys leave, I want to thank you all for watching this video, and I want to let you know that this is my 100th video, and was being uploaded on the same day my first video came out. I put so much effort into this video for you guys, so if you like this kind of content, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe for next time. Bye!